Oh, could you make me a co-host? Oh, not yet.
Indeed. Yes. Hello, everyone. We're just going to give folks a few minutes to get on in the webinar here. Thank you for joining us today. All right. I think we can go ahead and get started. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Technology Tuesdays. My name is Lydia Nimke, and I'm excited to bring you all today's presentation on the sharing economy. You all are muted and have your microphones turned off by default, but please don't let that stop you from asking any questions you may have about today's presentation in the Q&A box down below. With us today in the background, we have Beth Gabriel.
Hi, everybody. I'm hanging out at the East Branch today, working and helping Lydia out. Feel free to put your questions into that chat box and I will read them out loud as I can throughout the presentation. Thanks, Lydia.
Thanks, Beth. So let's jump in and talk about some of the main concepts we'll be going over today. So first off, I'm going to talk about what the sharing economy actually is so that we can all start on the same page with a little bit of background knowledge. And I'll be sure to go over some of the advantages and disadvantages there so that we can have a well-rounded understanding of what we mean when we refer to the sharing economy. Then I'll be giving some of the kind of different categories of platforms we may find and briefly go over some of these services and their purposes. You'll probably see some familiar company names here if you've gone to some of the past Tech Tuesdays. Things like Uber, Lyft, they're kind of tried and true sharing economy examples. Then I'll talk about what the sharing economy means for all of us and how we as individuals may be able to participate and benefit from it. And then finally, I'm going to do a short demonstration in two of the apps that we haven't covered in any Tech Tuesdays before, AirBnB and TaskRabbit. So let's get started. What is the sharing economy? Well, it goes by many names. Some call it the gig economy, others the peer economy, others still collaborative economy or collaborative consumption. But essentially, what it allows people to do is exchange the tangible and intangible with one another in a large scale. These exchange relationships often undercut traditional retail or employment arrangements, generally by reducing friction or looping middlemen out of the equation. So now, the sharing economy is a pretty recent a concept or invention, as we're going to talk about it today for the main part. But people have always, shared with their neighbors, given things to the less fortunate, or received, a loaner item from someone up the block. But now the big difference is you can get an unsecured personal loan directly from your peers, or you can share an office space with dozens of employees from different companies, or stay at a stranger's house instead of a hotel when you're traveling. These sharing economy platforms we're talking about today make it easier to exchange resources on demand, and it's argued that it helps to increase efficiency. In many circumstances, it allows participants to get by without owning valuable items, such as cars, while creating opportunities for others to extract value from idle possessions or talents. And this just wouldn't be possible without the amount of technology we have today. Everyone has a super fast computer in their pocket. Most people, shall I say. Virtually all forms of the sharing economy use the internet to help connect providers with customers, whether they're renting a house through Airbnb, sharing their car on Turo, or renting out extra space through Neighbor. Anyone can participate in the sharing economy. And in fact, whether you realize it or not, you probably already do. And if you don't, you probably will have a reason to soon enough. So there are definitely some advantages that you may find that in the past decade or so have contributed to the rise in popularity of the sharing economy. So for example, it can often lead to cheaper goods and services. The sharing economy is really built around the idea that sharing certain goods, services, and skills is more efficient than owning them for yourself. This can reduce costs for available goods, services, and time. So, for example, if you only need to use a bandsaw once a year, it's much cheaper to pay $20 to rent one from a neighbor or to get a membership at a tool lending library than to shell out the $1,000 you need to buy one for yourself. The same goes for an occasional service like annual house cleaning or, a ride to and from a place in a densely populated area. By using something or someone only when it's necessary, you don't have to deal with the headaches or costs of ownership, such as, you know, owning a car or, maintaining that car, things like that. In essence, the sharing economy helps to cut out some middlemen, whether it's a company you buy goods and services from or an employer that you would have to, report to. Um, it also has the ability to provide extra income for the people who are providing the service or the good. On the other side of the transaction, an owner can unlock the potential value of an item, such as a vehicle that would otherwise be sitting in the driveway or a talent that wouldn't be utilized in a day job by sharing it when you're not occupied. By giving rides or working in a talent marketplace, you can replace or supplement the income you'd earn in a traditional job. And by renting out your house or possessions, you can earn passive income while you're doing other things, potentially fun things. And then there's also the chance to get new and better opportunities. The sharing economy offers access to things that might not be practical to own or obtain. For instance, in a lot of cities, many people just can't afford a car. The maintenance, the parking, it's just a huge headache and not practical. People also, maybe they can't convince a traditional bank to extend a personal loan to them. Peer networks make it possible to access these things without asking participants to pay a lot or assume an unacceptable amount of risk. And then finally, it can be said that sharing economies help to contribute to stronger communities. Most sharing economy type platforms, such as ride sharing apps and Airbnb, have built in ratings and reviews that help keep providers and consumers honest. Coworking and task marketplaces are built on the idea of interpersonal collaboration and resource sharing. And some platforms use their influence and the shared resources of their participants to help people in need. For example, according to Tech Republic, Airbnb helped to coordinate free accommodations for people affected by natural disasters, and TaskRabbit is experimenting with organizing volunteers in crisis situations. These and other trust building efforts help sharing economy participants see one another as equals, building constructive relationships where none existed previously. So, for example, when I order a Lyft, I recognize that I am in someone's car, I'm in their personal vehicle, and in my head, I kind of conceive of it as, this person's giving me a ride, this person's just giving me a lift. Whereas it would be a lot more transactional if it was, a taxi or a bus. And there are also some disadvantages that come from participating in the sharing economy. So, first and foremost, are privacy and safety concerns. The sharing economy requires people on both sides of the transaction to forfeit some privacy. So, for instance, when you rent out your house on Airbnb or Verbo, you're pretty much inviting strangers into your home. While you trust your renters to be respectful and law abiding, you, of course, can't be 100% sure that they will follow through and treat your home as you would treat it. The same issue applies to ride sharing, selling or renting items, or using a platform to source in person labor. By contrast, taxi services, traditional retail outlets, and cleaning and contracting services, they have to be licensed and insured and abide by consumer protection regulations. And those things don't necessarily apply the same way to the sharing economy providers. There also may be no or few guarantees. When you're sharing your resources with others, you're assuming the risk that you might not get paid or that the items you share will be damaged. In participating in a sharing economy, you're also required to have a large degree of cooperation and communication with others that isn't necessarily required through more traditional formats. Though its community building power can be a benefit, the sharing economy requires such a close cooperation between people on each side that it can lead to trade-offs that can constrain your independence or self-reliance. For instance, if you're using a co-working space that you share with many other people, you have to agree to share resources that if you rented a standalone office suite, you'd have total control over. So even though you want to print 1,000 flyers for your business on the copier, it's not really fair to take up that resource from everyone else in the room for the whole day it may take you to print out those 1,000 flyers. When you rent out a house um, or apartment, you occupy a space that belongs to someone else. You may be subject to a homeowners association rules or just the neighbors. Whereas in a hotel room, you don't have to behave like you're a guest in someone's home. And then finally, there can be a pretty big disadvantage economically um, that individual consumers like you and I don't really even have direct control over, and that is market distortions. The sharing economy's inherently disruptive effects sometimes feel, bad to people who aren't necessarily taking part in it. Um, the most prevalent example of this can be seen in the local housing market distortions that have kind of come as a result of Airbnb's popularity. So, increase in short term rentals drives up property values to make it so that local people can't necessarily afford to own homes where they otherwise may have been able to 10 years ago or so. So now that we have a general idea of what we mean when we refer to the sharing economy and a good idea of some of the advantages and disadvantages that come from this form of cooperative economics, let's delve in to talk about some of the platforms that we can use that are based in the sharing economy. A big part of these services is that they're often in direct opposition to a more traditional format. So, if anyone remembers when Amazon was just a bookstore, it directly challenged the brick and mortar bookstores by offering online shopping and quick shipping. So, there is often that direct, traditional version and the sharing economy version, and they kind of take market share from each other. So there are a lot of different areas and categories, and I'm going to try and talk about each of them. With a few exceptions, most of the things you'll see listed on the slides here are just platforms that facilitate a designated type of transaction. But to be honest, the same transaction could definitely be carried out face to face or via text or a myriad of different ways. So, first, we'll talk a little bit about peer to peer lending. These platforms are a specific kind of platform that allow folks to lend and borrow money without going through a traditional bank. Based on the borrower's credit history, the interest rate is usually set by the platform, which acts as an intermediary between the two parties. However, the individual who lends the money bears the risk. Though the most common type of peer to peer loan is an unsecured personal loan offered on platforms like Lending Club and Prosper. Other platforms like SoFi offer student loan and mortgage refinancing loans as well. So this challenges traditional institution to individual lending because it's just not an option for many would-be borrowers. Peer-to-peer lending platforms have tend to have more liberal standards for loans than traditional banks and offer opportunities to a wider range of borrowers. Um, and since the platforms themselves don't have to worry about absorbing losses from failed loans, they can be much leaner as an entity than traditional banks. This does create some risk for individual lenders who lend via peer to peer platforms, but it also allows them to put some of their capital to use without having to research stocks or funds or just settling for the little interest payments from a savings account. And like I mentioned, it also provides much needed capital to borrowers who may not be able to find a traditional loan at an affordable rate or at all because maybe they have a shaky credit history or their bank just doesn't, want to fund them. I think this is a really cool concept. I haven't personally used it, but I like the idea of it and might use it in the future. Who knows? And then there is crowdfunding. So, like peer to peer lending, crowdfunding connects people who need money with those who are willing to provide it. There are platforms like Kickstarter, GoFundMe, and Patreon. Entrepreneurs, artists, and others present startup or project ideas to a community of potential funders and then set a target fundraising amount and date. Dozens or even hundreds, or even thousands of individuals can contribute to a single campaign. This makes crowdfunding doubly potent as a top small business fundraising option. Now, unlike peer to peer lending, the recipients aren't always expected to repay the funds. Some crowdfunding campaigns function like grants, where lenders give money with the understanding that they won't get it back. Others are more like capital raising rounds, where startups or small business solicit investments. Still, others like Patreon are ways for creatives to support themselves by creating online content or, other types of items and letting their supporters contribute a small monthly amount towards supporting them in their art. Crowdfunding platforms challenge traditional business financing, which again might be difficult to obtain, as are grants, because um, if there is a market for your product or service and an entrepreneur can sell the product or service to the appropriate consumer before they even have that product, they can get the money they need to develop it. And that kind of tests the market right there and proves that there is a need or a want for what they're selling. And then for those who contribute funds, rewards can range from emotional satisfaction of supporting something that you care about to an equity stake in a potentially successful venture. Now, for co working hubs and spaces, I will say that although you can always come work on your projects at the library and use our high speed internet, printers, scanners, and more, a relatively new development has come in the form of co working spaces. And they're like all over the place right now. And you can tend to find them in major cities. Um, I wouldn't even say major, mid sized cities and up. Co-working spaces let you share the cost of office rent, utilities, storage, mail, etc. with other professionals. It's particularly useful for freelancers, sole providers, and very small businesses that don't have huge inventories. On this slide, I have listed three co-working spaces that are in or near downtown Milwaukee. These facilities are stocked with coffee and have phone lines and Wi-Fi connections. You tend to pay a weekly or monthly fee based on your space requirements and the amount of time you spend at the office. I think the Hive is $200 a month for a desk and $600 a month for like a locked office suite. So pretty reasonable, a whole lot less than buying or renting a, office suite all to yourself in downtown Milwaukee. Co-working spaces really work to challenge traditional workspaces in offices and what the image of a successful person looks like, right? Traditional workplaces are so expensive, but co-working allows freelancers to work in a dynamic office environment at a relatively low cost. And it's also a social experience that puts people in close contact with professionals who have complementary talents. This makes forming mutually beneficial partnerships easier for like everyone. So, housing in the sharing economy. Apartment and house sharing platforms like Airbnb, Verbo, and Home Exchange connect homeowners with people who need a place to stay when they're traveling. Hosts set the nightly price and specify available dates. Typically when they're not there, but Airbnb, for example, you can just rent a room in someone's house if you just need a small room to stay in for the night. In preparation for a trip, visitors can browse their accommodations in their destination and choose a place that fits their desired neighborhood, amenity, needs, and budget, just like when you're shopping for a hotel. It these housing platforms challenge the traditional hospitality industry, which is focused on hotels and hotel rooms specifically, as opposed to entire suites, apartments, or homes. Because previously, when you were in an unfamiliar place and just needed a bed or a couch to crash on, you had to check into a hotel or motel. That was like your only option, unless you knew somebody around. But now you can find people willing to share their entire home and all the amenities that come with it, often at a lower cost than a traditional hotel or motel. And these are especially great if you want to explore, the lesser known parts of a town. Platforms like Airbnb, Verbo, and Home Exchange offer you the opportunity to stay in neighborhoods that are further away from those touristy type of districts that hotels tend to be clustered in. All right. Moving on to reselling and trading platforms. So, of course, eBay has been around for a very long time. But the reason it's included here is because it lets you buy, sell, and trade new and used goods without the face to face interaction. And it allows you to get rid of something you don't need anymore, give it to a person at a discounted cost, and buy something you may need now at a discounted cost. So it's part of that, circular economy. And Craigslist, of course, is great for this, as is Facebook Marketplace, as well as Kitizen. Kitizen is a online marketplace that's specifically for used children's toys and clothing. So there are quite a few super niche um, platforms in this category that might just focus on reselling designer clothes or reselling cool sneakers and things like that. So, of course, this challenges those retail outlets and manufacturers that sell new items with a significant markup. But here we're cutting out that middleman. If I have something that Beth wants and Beth has something that I want, we can just trade, or I can give Beth $10, she can give me 15, and we're both happy. All right. So, ride sharing and car sharing. We've kind of talked about before in previous Tech Tuesdays, specifically the be your own travel agent. So, I'm not going to talk about them too much here. But if you want me to go into more detail, please feel free to let me know. I'm always happy to. So, ride sharing and car sharing offer some of the benefits of car ownership, such as easy access to a city or town without having to rely on public transit, with few of the drawbacks, such as paying for gas, insurance, maintenance, tolls, parking. You probably still have to pay for parking if you're renting the car through Turo. But with apps like Uber and Lyft, you're just hailing a ride from drivers in their personal vehicles. And then with services like Turo and Zipcar, you can commandeer a shared vehicle owned by an organization or an individual and pay for the time you drive it. So this challenges those taxi and rental car companies, which some may say have become pretty antiquated. Ride sharing has really forced these traditional entities to adopt technological solutions like smartphone apps, for example, to help them compete. Depending on the location, your rides with Uber or Lyft or other companies can cost half the amount of an identical taxi trip. And car sharing companies like Zipcar mainly charge for the time, be it minutes or hours and distance that you drive. They're usually much cheaper than rental car companies, which typically charge by the day. And companies like Turo allow you to rent a wide variety of vehicles from luxury cars to older cars at a really good rate, because, again, there's no middleman. That intermediary kind of disappears. So now, knowledge and talent sharing platforms really focus on enabling the transfer of those intangible things. So if you have a skill or knowledge base that you're not using in your day-to-day job, the sharing economy can help you profit off of that if that is something that you're looking to do. If you're a handy person and don't mind doing kind of menial work, platforms like TaskRabbit let you offer your services in niches like house cleaning, building furniture, tending gardens, running errands, doing small deliveries, things like that. And then freelancing websites like Fiverr and Upwork let you share a wide range of skills with multiple employers, which eliminates the need to rely on a single source of income. So this challenges traditional employment. Um, their talent marketplaces are really flexible that and that kind of eliminates some of the stress and complexity of the hiring process and a 9 to 5 grind every day. If you have the skills or the knowledge, these platforms can help you earn money um, often from the comfort of your own home. This helps to create economic opportunities for those willing to do it and gives you a source to find people to help you with things that you aren't able to do. Now, maker spaces are physical places where people gather to collaborate on anything to do with like science, technology, engineering, and math, woodworking, computer science, graphic design, creating. Hence the maker and makerspace. Um, Makerspaces were actually inspired by the hacker movement, and they're famous for hardware projects, so physically tangible things, but there are all different kinds. And they often feature tools for metalworking, woodworking, electronics, textiles, computers, 3D printing, laser cutting, really niche and oftentimes big type of machinery that many people at home may not have. And makerspaces actually reduce the time to complete projects because of the expertise that a maker can draw on from the people around them who may have been using a laser cutter for 10 or 15 years. If you can just ask someone, that is a really, really valuable resource. And then there are other niche markets. There's so many more that I don't necessarily have the time to get into all of them. And there's so many that don't necessarily fit into a large overarching sort of category. Um, but they're extremely useful to small slices of the population. So, for instance, Splinster lets you rent a bike when you're traveling or when you decide you just want a bike to work on a beautiful day. It's a great way for bike owners and owners of other types of recreational equipment to earn passive income and for bikeless people to source a sustainable ride. Not everyone has the space or wants to maintain a bike, which is quite a big deal. I bought a bike this summer, and you'd be surprised. Keeping a bike in good condition is not that easy. So, neighbor.com allows you to rent storage spaces from people in your community, whether that's a bedroom to store boxes in or a driveway to park your boat this winter. Swimply is really cool, and I wish we had had this when I was a kid. During the summer, of course, Swimply actually lets you see who near you has a swimming pool that they aren't using and allows you to rent them by the hour. And Rent the Runway is another just really niche market that allows you to rent designer dresses and clothing for the occasional wear for a designated time period before sending it back. So, whoever rents a beautiful $2,000 dress may rent it for $100 and they get to look awesome and super fancy without having to spend all that money for a dress they're going to wear once or twice, and then they'll have to store it. And all of these really, you know, cut out the middleman, reduce costs, and connect like minded people. So, people who want to swim and people who have pools, people who want a bike, and people who have bicycles. And I think that is really cool, an interesting way to build community. All right. I know I kind of ran through those. Are there any questions about these platforms, some of their services that I can answer before we move into the demo portion?
Let's see. So far, no questions in the Q&A. We had someone that had just a nice comment that this is the best workshop. They need this for their startup business. And then they asked about some print materials for Zoom classes, which I answered, I think.
Oh,
If not,
sweet.
feel free to hit me back up, Regina. But other than that, I don't think we have any questions.
Awesome sauce. So let's jump into demo. Never mind my email, guys. All right. So here we are on Airbnb.com. And it's really gonna function more or less just like you're looking at hotels online. Or if you happen to be a, Zillow browser or a Redfin browser, it's gonna function a little bit like one of those two. So you're gonna wanna type in your location. I just used Airbnb this past summer to go to Charlotte. So let's use that as an example. You're gonna put your check-in date, just like you would with a hotel. So let's see. I don't want to go too quick, too close to Thanksgiving. All right. You can also say I'm flexible. If you're just looking to travel or maybe get away locally, you can do that. And you also have the option to say plus or minus 1 day, plus or minus 3 days, or plus or minus 7 days. Because it's possible that the perfect place for you, beautiful views, hot tub, whatever you're looking for, is there. It's just booked the last day that you wanted to be there. But you don't want that to be excluded. So I always like to at least choose that plus or minus 1 day. And then guess. So how many people are coming? There are an adults, children, and infant section. Because these are people's personal houses, I don't know if anyone here has kids and has ever taken their children to a person's house who doesn't have kids, but like you definitely want to make sure that the house is friendly and appropriate for the littles if you're planning on bringing them with you. So, adults, and then you push search and see what comes up. So we have our map view over on the right here. You may or may not see this depending on how wide your screen that you're looking at is, but you can always toggle that on or use the list, whatever works for you. And as we get in closer, we can see where all these different sort of places are. This right here is downtown Charlotte. And then we can see some things that are more on the outliers. So let's go ahead and take a look. This one is listed as a super host, if you can see in the left-hand corner of this picture here. And it's pretty close to downtown. This person has 33 reviews. Looks pretty good. Looks pretty good. I might consider that one. And again, we have another superhost. A superhost is just Airbnb's way of, verifying that the person has had many transactions through their platform and has received decent reviews. All right, let's pick one of these to look at. I want to look at one that's really close to downtown. So I'm going to use this map. That looks good. Before we click on that though, I'm gonna go over these filters in the top area here. So for type of place, you can choose to have the entire place to yourself, have a private room, or take a look at hotel rooms, which is more usually going to be akin to a hostel or a bed and breakfast than a La Quinta or something like that. You can also narrow by price. We're going to see the average nightly price and then see some outliers here and usually some outliers here. And if you're on a budget, you can just scooch that to where you're comfortable and press save. Instant books. You can book without waiting for the person who owns the house to approve you. And then if you have specific bed, bathroom requirements, you can input that here. And then there's a host of other features, including amenities and things like that. So let's go in to click on this listing here. So of course you're going to see some pictures of the place and the different amenities. And that's always nice to see and check out. And you can tell a lot about a place if they have like professional and good looking photographs. That helps a lot. And then I always want to check the reviews, see what people are saying, see the dispersal of reviews. That's important to me, especially with these sharing economy services. The reviews are really important because the owner of this unit is working directly with someone who wants to stay in their unit. They have a mutual interest, and the transaction should presumably go very well. And if it doesn't go well, then it's probably not for me. And from there, we see we have a 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom place right in the middle of downtown Charlotte. It's going to cost a little bit of money. There is a cleaning fee and so on and so forth. And if we wanted to go ahead with this, we could just click reserve, sign up or log in if we have an account with Airbnb, and go from there. Once you book, you can be in communication with the owner. So if you, for example, need your bedding washed in hypoallergenic stuff, you can communicate that with them. If you have questions about what's nearby, when I went to Charlotte and stayed in an Airbnb, our host was super kind and like gave us a whole list of things we could check out that were like within walking distance of the unit. That was much appreciated. It's, you know, almost like having a concierge, but like they actually live there, so they actually know what's around. Very nice. And that's really Airbnb in a nutshell. If you wanted to share it with people you're traveling with, you can always push that share button near the top and share it via email, messenger, text. And you can see a little bit more information about the amenities that the place offers by scrolling down. And that's pretty simple. Airbnb is in most places now, so it's always worth a shot, especially if you're doing price comparison and you want to see, is it worth getting a suite, or do I want to see if Airbnb has a villa that's comparable or something like that. It's always worth rotating into your planning. Now, if there are no questions on Airbnb, we might move on to TaskRabbit.
No questions on Airbnb. I've used it in the past. I like it a lot. I stayed on a houseboat in Boston because of Airbnb with some friends, and it was super awesome.
Very cool. See, there's no
Yeah.
way you're doing that through a hotel, I bet.
Nope, I don't think so, unless it's a big cruise ship, maybe, which no,
Hey.
thank you. Very good.
Cool. So we are going to jump into TaskRabbit side of things. So here we are. We're just on TaskRabbit.com. and they have a really user-friendly interface. We're pretty much just going to type in what we need help with, and it gives you some popular projects, um, minor repairs, assemble furniture. We got an IKEA down in Oak Creek, so maybe you bought a bunch of stuff from IKEA, but putting it together is not going to be your job. You can find someone else and ask them to do it for you. So let's say furniture assembly. I often do this with furniture. I buy it and I'm like, I could totally put that together. And then when I'm on at night, have all the pieces spread around me and I'm just looking at the mess I've created, I usually wish I could go somewhere like this and have someone help me with it. So you're going to enter in your address. I'm going to use the address of the Bayview Library and continue. And they're asking what type of furniture I need assembled or disassembled. Also, really great for moving. If you're moving and you have furniture items you need to pack flat, you can have them disassemble items as well. Okay. Okay. So we're just going to pick something pretty simple to assemble. We're going to add that to task. If it wants to work. Oops, there we go. And after you kind of describe what you need to be done, and each different task is going to ask for different information from you. You're going to choose the date and time and select and continue. And then it's going to want me to log in with my information and stuff like that. Let's look at another TaskRabbit really quickly. So say I wanted some yard work done. Again, you have to enter your address. And if you were logged in, you might not have to enter your address. And see, it's asking me different information to kind of get the details of what I need help with so I can find the best person to help me with them. Details of your task. Oops. Okay, and now we're gonna click, and this is a little different. Now we're seeing people who can do that job for us. Bunch of different people, bunch of different prices. If you can find one you like, after reading some of their reviews, after seeing how reliable they are, meaning how often they show up to scheduled work, um, you can select and again choose your dates and continue. All right. And that's TaskRabbit. I was really excited when this came to Milwaukee because it wasn't always here. I think it's a really good resource for people who want to work in the gig economy, in the sharing economy. All right, let's jump back into our presentation here. So now after I've said all of that, and I know I said a lot, you may ask, how do I take part in the sharing economy? I don't need anyone to do yard work for me or to assemble IKEA furniture. Can I still participate? Of course. Um, and the simple way to do that is to share more and buy less, right? Maybe you don't need to purchase an $80 wok to make a recipe you thought sounded good. Maybe you can just borrow one from a friend to use. So check with family, friends, and neighbors before you buy. Maybe you want to consider owning some different board games than the ones your friends own and playing with the non-board game owning friends. So you're kind of getting that experience by sharing things with one another. Or sharing suitcases is a really good example. Sharing suitcases with other family members when they go on holiday. Unless you're often traveling together, that can be a good cost saving measure because suitcases are expensive. If you are interested in the community and potential social impact of the sharing economy specifically, I highly recommend you check out shareable.net for a bunch of guides which can help you save money and reduce waste and build a community all through sharing. You can do things like organize a share fest where people bring things they no longer need and everybody just kind of gives freely and expects nothing in return, which is really awesome. You can even start your own tool lending library. If you have a bunch of tools that you don't necessarily use anymore, there are people out here who barely have more than a hammer and a screwdriver who would love to borrow some of those tools from you. So think about that. And like I mentioned, I'll send out this link in the follow-up email to shareable.net. I found it a really good resource when I was creating this presentation. And if you're not trying to reinvent the wheel here, think about which of the platforms and that I've kind of gone over today you would find useful as a consumer. Do you love to swim but don't often get down to the lake or wherever you like to swim? Or you're really far away from the YMCA now that you've moved, but you'd still love to be able to take a dip every now and then? Maybe you want to check out Swimply. If you often travel and are seeing those car rental prices just go up and up and up, maybe you want to check out Turo next time. It's all about finding a use for it in your life. It should present itself more often than not. And then, if you have extra stuff, you can become a provider. So, which lets you help those people with a need. Um, you can clear out extra space in your home by getting rid of the things you no longer have a need for. If you are participating in a tool lending library or makerspace sort of place, or even a co-working space, you can share your expertise with others. And then last but not least, there's that potential for extra income that's not too shabby as well. So those are all ways that you can participate in the sharing economy if you so choose. Okay, I know that was a lot, but are there any questions you all have?
Let's see. Arlene noticed when you were on TaskRabbit that when you clicked the no yard work filter, people still showed up in the search. Or why did the people who said no yard work show up when you requested for yard work?
Sure, good question, Arlene. Let's see if we can find one of those people. So, for example, Kevin here. Kevin hasn't done any yard work or removal related tasks, so he doesn't have any reviews, but he is probably indicated somewhere in his profile that he's willing to do yard work and capable of doing it. So it might be a little bit of a guess to hire him specifically for yard work. But me thinking if he's 100% reliable, he has transportation, even if he hasn't trimmed hedges before, it might be worth still asking him to trim the hedges or scrolling up and asking Dylan if he's available because he has done 26 yard work and removal related tasks. So, kind of weigh your options. Maybe Dylan's not available when we need him to be to get our hedges trimmed up before, the winter comes. So we look and look and look and we figure out, Kevin will do. So that's why Kevin's showing up. Thank you for the question. That's a great question. All right.
Yeah, and
Any
then no more questions, but just a comment from Kitty saying that they joined the Buy Nothing Wauwatosa group, which helped her get free boxes and bubble wrap for moving, which I think believe is on Facebook. Yep.
Yes, definitely. Those buy nothing groups. I know there's a buy nothing Milwaukee Southside group. I know there's a Tosa one. I think there's a West Dallas one. I think there's an East Side one. Like you got to search your neighborhood and like buy nothing or free, and you'll tend to find them. And people are giving away. It's usually stuff that's just fine that they just don't want in their space anymore. So I highly encourage that. Thank you for the tip, Kitty. And yeah, so you'll be receiving a recording of today's presentation on Thursday. So look forward to that. And if you have any additional questions in the meantime, you can feel free to email me. My email is lcnimke@milwaukee.gov. And that's pretty much all I have for you today. Thank you so much for joining us today for Technology Tuesdays. I hope some of you will join us next week, where we'll do a deep dive into YouTube. Um, so, again, thanks for joining us. Have a wonderful rest of your week, and I'll see you next time.
Bye, everyone. Have a good day.